On January 20, 1969, the 37th President of the United States was preparing to take the oath of office. Very few people believed he could win. His own party had opposed him, and the sitting president strongly disliked him. Still, Robert Francis Kennedy had succeeded against all odds. Bobby demonstrated toughness, determination, persistence, courage, and deep compassion for people, along with a strong commitment to doing what he believed was right. He had run against a candidate considered far more qualified and was widely seen as a long shot. His campaign centered on reconciliation, cooperation, and uniting the nation. It aimed to heal division, correct injustice, and shape American history for decades. However, that presidency never came to pass. For the past 50 years, America has wondered what Bobby Kennedy might have offered. Many people related to him because they saw him survive terrible personal tragedy and still maintain hope and optimism. Many believe that if he had lived, he could have become one of the nation's greatest presidents. His life represents the journey of a Cold War warrior who later supported peace, a privileged son who became a defender of the poor, and a story marked by tragedy, success, high principles, and political manipulation, making him known as America's lost president. On Cape Cod along the Atlantic coast, wealthy families, including the Kennedys, spent their summers. In 1930, Bobby Kennedy was 4 years old and the seventh of 9 children. He was small and awkward and was often teased by his siblings because of his buck teeth, speech stammer, and inability to swim. During a sailing trip, after enduring too many jokes, Bobby tried to prove himself by jumping into the water and nearly drowned. He always possessed a quiet but stubborn determination and a natural instinct for bold, sudden actions, shaped partly by insecurity. His father described him as the weakest child of the group. Bobby was shy, less outgoing than his siblings, and more introverted. He connected strongly with his mother Rose and was deeply religious like her, which created a unique bond between them. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy, had extremely high expectations for all his children, especially his sons. As one of the richest men in America, he built wealth through the stock market, Hollywood films, and other investments. The family enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle, spending summers in Cape Cod and winters in Palm Beach. Joseph Kennedy was influential in the Democratic Party and was determined that one of his sons would become president. At first, he placed these hopes on his oldest son, Joseph Jr. However, in August 1944, Joseph Jr. was killed during a dangerous wartime mission in Europe at age 29. His death devastated the family and deeply affected Bobby, who admired his older brother greatly. Bobby also realized he would need to take on new responsibilities within the family. Joseph Kennedy then focused his ambitions on his second son, John Jack. In 1946, John F. Kennedy was elected as a congressman from Massachusetts. That same year, Bobby started studying at Harvard. He was not considered an outstanding student and was viewed as average academically, especially compared to his brothers. However, Bobby stood out in another way. He was the first to get married. He married Ethel Skakel, who had been college roommates with his sister Jean. During this time, Bobby was still shy, and Ethel's outgoing and lively personality helped bring him out of his shell. In 1951, with help from his father, Bobby began working as a lawyer in the Department of Justice. Soon afterward, he left to manage Jack's Senate campaign at age 26, mainly because of family responsibility. Bobby handled much of the tough work behind the scenes while Jack remained the public face. He served as Jack's trusted advisor and clearly understood that his role was to support his brother's rise. The election took place during the same period Dwight Eisenhower won the presidency by a landslide, but John F. Kennedy still won his Senate seat. Shortly after, Bobby accepted a job working for Senator Joe McCarthy, a Republican and family acquaintance supported financially by Joseph Kennedy. McCarthy was strongly anti-communist and believed communists had infiltrated the U.S. government. During televised hearings, he questioned and accused individuals of being communists, while Bobby worked beside him as legal counsel. Bobby supported McCarthy's mission at first, believing communism was the world's greatest threat. Over time, however, Bobby became disappointed, clashed with other staff members, and left the position within a year. As he approached age 30, Bobby was eager to build his own reputation. In 1957, he found that chance when he became chief counsel to the Senate Labor Rackets Committee. There, he focused on corruption within powerful labor unions, especially the Teamsters, the largest trucking union in America, led by Jimmy Hoffa. This role suited Bobby because he believed he was fighting wrongdoing and strongly believed in clear moral lines between right and wrong, especially during that period of his life. Bobby Kennedy's work with the Rackets Committee was driven by his strong desire to find justice, expose corruption, and reveal the deeper problems within American society, which he believed he was always fighting against. He viewed Jimmy Hoffa and union corruption as nearly as dangerous to America as communism. Although Hoffa managed to avoid conviction, Bobby's efforts raised his public profile, and he was no longer seen as the weakest member of the Kennedy family. There was growing discussion about his own political future, but family loyalty came first. In 1960, when his older brother John F. Kennedy ran for president, Bobby fully supported him. The 1960 election was the moment the Kennedy family had long prepared for. Before the general election, JFK had to win the Democratic nomination, and Bobby played a major role in managing that process. Primaries at the time were mostly signals of public support rather than decisive contests, but Bobby used them effectively while also confronting major issues, including fears about a Catholic president being influenced by the Pope. His campaign methods were innovative, focusing on excitement and freshness, foreshadowing modern political campaigns. Victories in places like Protestant West Virginia showed JFK could overcome anti-Catholic bias. Despite multiple primary wins, the nomination was only secured at the Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles, where their final major rival, Lyndon B. Johnson, challenged them. Johnson was one of the most skilled politicians in American history, serving as Senate Majority Leader and holding enormous political power. Unlike Kennedy, he relied on political connections rather than primary elections, believing he could secure delegate support at the convention. Bobby and Johnson disliked each other from the beginning. Johnson was known for political deal-making, while Bobby saw himself as guided by moral principles. Their backgrounds also differed. Johnson rose from modest beginnings, while the Kennedys were wealthy and privileged. Tensions worsened when Johnson tried to spread rumors that JFK was seriously ill. Bobby responded by arranging for a doctor to publicly deny that JFK had life-threatening Addison's disease, even though JFK did suffer from a serious form of it. Bobby's defense of his brother strengthened his hatred for Johnson. Johnson's tactics failed, and JFK secured the nomination. Although Johnson later joined the ticket as vice president due to his political strengths, tensions between him and Bobby remained. In the general election, Bobby again led JFK's campaign, helping secure a very narrow victory over Richard Nixon, sending the Kennedys to the White House. After JFK's victory, Bobby initially did not want a cabinet role and hoped to pursue his own path. However, JFK insisted he needed someone he completely trusted, leading Bobby to accept the position of Attorney General, despite having little courtroom experience. At age 35, he became one of the youngest attorneys general in U.S. history, leading a department of over 30,000 employees and managing a $400 million budget. His influence extended beyond the Justice Department. He acted as gatekeeper to the president and served as his closest advisor. Without a formal chief of staff, JFK relied heavily on Bobby, who often spoke with authority on behalf of the administration. Bobby effectively became something close to a co-president, deeply involved in shaping policy and protecting JFK's political agenda. Bobby stood beside his brother during major global crises, especially the Cuban Missile Crisis, one of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War. While Bobby later described himself as favoring peaceful solutions in his book 13 Days, historical accounts suggest he initially supported more aggressive options like airstrikes or invasion. As the crisis continued, he backed JFK's decision to impose a naval blockade, which helped prevent nuclear war. After the crisis, focus shifted back to domestic issues. Although America still faced deep racial inequality, the Kennedy administration initially moved cautiously on civil rights. Southern Democratic support had been essential in the 1960 election and was expected to remain important. At first, civil rights was not Bobby's main priority, and he lacked deep understanding of the issue, having grown up in mostly white environments, even though voting rights laws already existed during his time as Attorney General. Bobby Kennedy's Department of Justice tried to increase African-American enrollment in southern states through lawsuits and prosecutions, but at the start of the Kennedy administration there was limited civil rights action. That changed in 1961 when Freedom Riders were violently attacked by white mobs in Anniston, Birmingham, and Montgomery, often with help from local police. This was a wake-up call for Bobby Kennedy, showing him that some Southern leaders allowed violence against civil rights activists. He became far more committed to civil rights, forming a strong connection with the movement. Many African Americans viewed him as one of the most effective attorneys general in promoting civil rights. He strengthened the Civil Rights Division, pushed for more black government employees, and persuaded President Kennedy that civil rights was the key domestic issue of the era, tied to the founding belief that all people are created equal. As the 1964 election approached, the Kennedy team prepared campaign plans, including a visit to Dallas. Then President Kennedy was assassinated. Bobby learned the news through a call from J. Edgar Hoover and immediately feared the worst. The loss changed him deeply, giving him a more fatalistic outlook. He became a national figure of mourning, delivering powerful eulogies and helping the country grieve. Later, he fell into a deep depression, questioning his faith and struggling with grief for many months. During this time, Jackie Kennedy supported him and introduced him to books like The Greek Way, which influenced his belief in reducing human cruelty and making the world more compassionate. This period pushed Bobby toward a major intellectual and spiritual transformation and helped him rediscover his purpose. After JFK's death, Lyndon B. Johnson became president. Although some people wanted Bobby as vice president, the two men disliked each other, and Johnson instead chose Hubert Humphrey. Bobby remained Attorney General and played an important role in helping pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, working with Johnson despite their rivalry. After the law passed, Bobby resigned in September 1964 and ran for the U.S. Senate from New York, starting his own independent political career. At first, Bobby struggled with moving from being an advisor to being a candidate. He often referenced his brother and copied some of his style, seeing the campaign as a tribute to JFK. His advisors encouraged him to speak in his own voice. When the campaign became difficult and he risked losing, Bobby finally found confidence and began establishing himself as a strong political leader on his own. On November 3, 1964, Lyndon Johnson won re-election by a huge margin, and on the same day Bobby Kennedy won his Senate race in New York. Unlike most new senators, he already had national influence and quickly focused attention on issues he cared about, especially poverty. He helped create a model anti-poverty program in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, which later influenced Johnson's war on poverty. Kennedy became one of the strongest voices against poverty and racial injustice. At the same time, America was deeply divided, social change created tension, and the Vietnam War kept expanding. The U.S. had been involved since Eisenhower, increased support during Kennedy's presidency, and under Johnson the war turned into a major national crisis. Johnson feared being seen as the president who lost America's first war, so he sent combat troops and increased bombing, making Vietnam a dominant public issue. Bobby Kennedy had supported strong military action earlier, but as the war worsened, his views changed. He became worried about escalation but first stayed quiet due to political concerns. Johnson ignored his views. In 1967, Kennedy met European leaders who supported peace in Vietnam, but when this became public, Johnson accused him of trying to weaken the presidency. Kennedy then openly opposed the war and bombing campaigns. In March 1967, he gave a Senate speech admitting mistakes and calling for withdrawal, becoming one of the leading anti-war voices. In January 1968, the Tet Offensive shocked Americans and weakened trust in Johnson, who had promised victory was near. By the 1968 election year, Johnson was very unpopular. Senator Eugene McCarthy challenged him in the Democratic primaries and did unexpectedly well, showing Johnson's political weakness. On March 16, 1968, Robert F. Kennedy announced he was running for president. Some thought he was reacting to McCarthy's success, but he had planned to run earlier and delayed his announcement to avoid hurting McCarthy. His campaign focused on civil rights, poverty, and ending the Vietnam War. Soon after, Johnson shocked the country by announcing he would not run again. Vice President Hubert Humphrey then entered the race as the main establishment candidate. Kennedy aimed to win through the primaries despite strong competition. While campaigning in Indiana, Kennedy learned Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. He gave a powerful speech in Indianapolis calling for love, unity, and justice. While riots happened in many cities, Indianapolis remained calm, largely because of his speech. Kennedy won primaries in Indiana and Nebraska, but losing Oregon made the race uncertain. The June 4th primaries in South Dakota and California became critical, especially California because of its size and importance. Despite strong opposition, Kennedy built strong public support by linking the war, jobs, and racism. He won South Dakota and narrowly won California, putting him close to the Democratic nomination. After celebrating in Los Angeles, he took a shortcut through the Ambassador Hotel kitchen, where Sirhan shot him. Kennedy died the next day. Sirhan said he acted because of Kennedy's support for Israel, possibly connected to tensions after the Six-Day War. After Kennedy's death, Hubert Humphrey became the Democratic candidate, but Republican Richard Nixon won the 1968 election. The election happened during major racial and social tensions, and Nixon gained support from voters wanting law and order. His presidency later became linked to the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. Many historians believe 1968 was a major turning point and wonder what might have happened if Kennedy had lived. Some think he could have won the presidency, possibly ended the Vietnam War earlier, and focused more on civil rights and poverty. Supporters believe his empathy, honesty, and connection with people might have helped unite the country. His message of hope, unity, and reconciliation remains an enduring vision of what America could have been.